She's wasting her life on failures, my brother's betrothed drawled, loud enough for half the country club to hear. Christine, the queen bee of pharmaceutical fortunes, just had to dissect my social work gig. I bit back a retort, picturing Mrs. Rodriguez's kids finally safe, Mark's shaky smile after rehab. Christine and Jake, blinded by dollar signs, had no clue about the call I'd taken just moments before, about the stranger claiming to be my husband. A husband who was about to walk through those doors, and they especially didn't know who he was. Billionaire status changes everything, doesn't it? But kindness? That's the real game changer. Trust me, they have no idea how her quiet compassion will rewrite their shallow world. Sometimes karma comes in the most unexpected way. If you've ever been looked down upon for choosing a meaningful career over money, this story will resonate with you. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because today's story proves that success isn't always measured by your salary. Trust me, you won't see this twist coming. My name is Angela, and what I'm about to tell you sounds like something out of a movie, but I promise you, every word is true. It's about the day my entire world changed when my own family tried to break me down and a complete stranger became my unexpected hero. I work as a social worker downtown, helping families who've lost everything find their way back. Every morning I walk into that community center knowing I might help a homeless mother find shelter for her kids or talk a teenager out of making the worst mistake of their life. The pay barely covers my rent. My car's held together with hope and duct tape. And my wardrobe comes mostly from thrift stores. But here's what I know that most people don't. When you save someone's life, when you keep a family together, when you give hope to someone who has none left, that's worth more than any amount of money could ever be. My grandmother raised me to believe that. She was the kindest woman who ever lived, always helping neighbors, feeding anyone who showed up hungry at her door. She taught me that real success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give back. After she passed last year, those lessons became even more important to me. They were all I had left of her wisdom. My brother Jake never understood that. 3 years older than me, Jake chose the corporate world and never looked back. He's an investment banker now, the kind who wears designer suits and drives cars worth more than most people's houses. Growing up, we were close, but success changed him. Every time we talked, it became a lecture about how I was wasting my education, how I could be making real money if I just got serious about my life. It stung, but I always believed that deep down he was proud of me. That belief was about to be shattered completely. 3 months ago, Jake called with news that should have made me happy. He was getting married to a woman named Christine, someone he'd met through work. The way he described her, she was perfect, beautiful, intelligent, from a wealthy family that owned a pharmaceutical empire. Their wedding was going to be the event of the season, held at the most exclusive country club in the city with over 200 guests. Despite everything, I was genuinely excited for him. Jake was my only family left, and I wanted nothing more than to see him happy. Meeting Christine should have been wonderful. Instead, it was my first taste of what was coming. The engagement party was at some upscale restaurant I'd only ever dreamed of eating at. I wore my best dress, a simple green one I'd saved up for, and tried to fit in among all the designer gowns and expensive jewelry. Christine was everything Jake had promised, tall, blonde, stunning, with the kind of confidence that comes from never wanting for anything. But when Jake introduced us, something cold flickered in her eyes. "So you're the sister," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jake told me so much about you. What is it you do again?" When I explained that I was a social worker, her expression changed instantly. "Oh," she said, drawing the word out like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "You're one of those charity workers." The dismissal in her voice was unmistakable. I tried to explain what I actually did, how I helped families rebuild their lives, how I worked with kids who had nowhere else to turn. But Christine's attention had already drifted away, her eyes scanning the room for more important people to talk to. Then her friends descended on us like vultures, and I realized Christine's coldness wasn't personal. It was cultural. These women dripping in diamonds and designer everything looked at me like I was some curious specimen. "Don't you want to actually contribute to society?" one of them asked with genuine confusion. Another added, I could never work with those people. It must be so depressing dealing with failures all day. I tried to defend what I did, explaining how social workers prevent children from being abused, how we keep families together during their darkest moments, how we provide hope when there seems to be none left. But they just exchanged glances and smiled condescendingly. "That's sweet, dear," Christine said in the voice you'd use with a small child. "But don't you think someone with your education could do more important work?" "Jake says you're very smart." I went home that night feeling smaller than I had in years, but I told myself was just nervous about the wedding. Once she got to know me, she'd understand. I couldn't have been more wrong. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with 1,000 tiny cuts. At every event, Christine found ways to diminish me. The bridal shower became an opportunity to introduce me as Jake's sister, the one who works in charity. The rehearsal dinner featured comments about how I'd chosen a simpler path in life. Each remark felt calculated to remind everyone that I was different, lesser, not quite good enough to be part of their world. The morning of the wedding, I stared at myself in the mirror of my tiny apartment, trying to summon courage I didn't feel. I'd chosen a soft yellow dress that made me feel confident and happy, had my hair done at a discount salon, and practiced smiling until my cheeks hurt. Looking at my reflection, I tried to convince myself that today would be different, that Christine would be too busy being a bride to focus on tearing me down. The country club was like something from a fairy tale, all white roses and gold accents with flowers that probably cost more than I make in 3 months. Guests arrived in luxury cars, women wearing gowns that could fund my program for a year. I felt like an imposter at my own brother's wedding, but I was determined to be there for Jake, no matter how unwelcome I felt. During the cocktail hour, I was standing near the bar trying to blend in when I heard Christine's voice cutting through the crowd. She was talking to a group of her friends, and she didn't realize I was close enough to hear every word. "It's such a shame about Jake's sister," she was saying, her voice carrying that tone of fake concern people use when they're gossiping. She had every opportunity to make something of herself, but she chose to waste her education playing social worker. I mean, what kind of person chooses to spend their days with homeless people and drug addicts when they could have a real career? Her friends were eating it up like candy. "How embarrassing for Jake," one of them responded. "Having a sister who works in charity must be so awkward at business functions." "Oh, it absolutely is," Christine replied without hesitation. "I've already talked to Jake about being more selective about family events after we're married. You simply can't have someone like that around when you're trying to build serious professional relationships. People judge you by the company you keep." I felt the blood drain from my face. This woman wasn't just dismissing my career. She was actively planning to cut me out of my brother's life. And apparently Jake was going along with it. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, leaving me struggling to breathe. I tried to compose myself and join conversations, but every interaction felt poisoned. When people asked what I did and I mentioned social work, their expressions would change. They'd find polite excuses to drift away, leaving me standing alone among strangers who clearly didn't think I belonged. The ceremony itself was beautiful, but I couldn't enjoy it. Every time I looked at Jake standing at that altar, I wondered if this was the last family event I'd ever attend. During the vows, when Christine promised to support Jake in all his endeavors, I couldn't help wondering if that support included eliminating family members who didn't meet her standards. After the ceremony, during the reception, Christine's mask finally came off completely. She was making rounds, playing the perfect hostess, accepting congratulations with that radiant smile. When she reached the table where I was sitting with some distant cousins, she decided to put on a show. "Everyone, I want you to meet Angela, Jake's sister," she announced, her voice loud enough to carry to nearby tables. "She works with, well, let's just say she helps unfortunate people. We've tried to get her a real job through our family connections, but she insists on staying with her charity work." The way she said charity work made it sound like something shameful, something to be pied. The people at my table shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to respond to such obvious condescension. I felt my face burning with humiliation and rage, but I was too shocked to form words. Christine wasn't finished destroying me. "You know," she continued, gesturing around the room full of successful professionals, "some people choose careers that actually make a difference in the world. Doctors, lawyers, business leaders who create jobs and drive the economy. Others choose simpler paths. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course, someone has to work with the poor people, right? We can't all be ambitious. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. She was systematically destroying my reputation and my dignity in front of a room full of people, and she was doing it with a smile on her face while wearing a wedding dress. I felt tears building behind my eyes, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. That's when I knew I had to find Jake. He was my brother, my only family left in this world. Surely when I told him what his new wife was doing, he'd stand up for me. I found him near the dance floor laughing with some old college friends, looking happier than I'd seen him in years. "Jake, can we talk privately?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. He looked annoyed at being pulled away from his friends, but he followed me to a quiet corner. I told him everything. Every cruel comment had made about my career, her plans to limit my involvement in family events, the way she just humiliated me in front of everyone. I expected shock, maybe anger on my behalf. Instead, he just sighed deeply and ran his hands through his hair like I was being dramatic. "Look, Angela, I know Christine can be direct sometimes," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But you have to understand the position I'm in. Her family has already opened doors for me that I never could have opened myself. These connections are crucial for my career." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So, you're okay with her treating me like garbage?" "I'm not okay with it," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "But maybe there's some truth to what she's saying. You are smart enough to do other things. Have you ever considered that maybe it's time to grow up and pursue a more serious career?" Those words hit me like a slap across the face. My own brother, the person who was supposed to love and support me unconditionally, was telling me that my life's work was meaningless, that dedicating myself to helping others, making a real difference in people's lives, wasn't good enough because it didn't come with prestige and a big paycheck. "Just try to blend in for the rest of the evening, okay?" he continued, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "Don't make waves. Christine's family is watching everything tonight, and first impressions are everything in business." I walked away from that conversation feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. The one person who was supposed to be on my side had chosen his new wife's money and social connections over his own sister. I was seriously considering leaving the reception and never speaking to Jake again when something happened that changed everything. I was standing outside on the country club's elegant patio, trying to get some fresh air and fight back tears when my phone rang. The number wasn't in my contacts, but something compelled me to answer anyway. "Hello," I said, my voice still shaky from everything that had happened. "Thank God you picked up," came a man's voice I didn't recognize. "I just landed and I'm having trouble finding the venue. Can you text me the exact address?" I frowned, confused. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong number." There was a pause. "Is this Angela?" "Yes, but I don't know who this is." Another pause, longer this time. "Angela, it's Daniel, your husband from Las Vegas." I almost dropped the phone. "My what? Your husband?" "We got married 6 months ago in Vegas." "I know this is crazy timing, but we really need to talk about getting this sorted out properly." And suddenly, like a dam breaking, it all came flooding back. 6 months ago, I'd been in Las Vegas for a social work conference. It had been one of the worst months of my career. I'd lost 2 young clients to overdoses, and I was questioning everything about my life and my choices. On the last night of the conference, feeling lost and defeated, I'd gone to the hotel bar planning to have one drink and ended up sitting next to this man who looked as miserable as I felt. His name was Daniel, and he was in town for some technology conference. He just ended a long relationship and was having his own existential crisis about the direction of his life. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, drinking far too much in the process. I remembered laughing more than I had in months, feeling like I'd finally found someone who understood what it was like to feel lost in your own life. The rest was a blur of neon lights and bad decisions. Somehow we'd ended up in one of those infamous Vegas wedding chapels, exchanging cheap rings and slurred vows while an Elvis impersonator officiated. I woke up the next morning with the worst hangover of my life, a plastic wedding ring on my finger, and a marriage certificate on the nightstand. Daniel was gone, presumably back to his real life, and I was left wondering if it had all been some alcohol-induced hallucination. I'd kept the marriage certificate, meaning to look into annulment procedures, but life got busy, and I convinced myself it wasn't legally binding anyway. We'd both been drunk. It was Vegas, and we were complete strangers. It couldn't possibly count as a real marriage. Apparently I was wrong, and now my accidental husband was calling me at the worst possible moment. "Daniel, I really can't deal with this right now," I whispered into the phone, glancing around to make sure no one could overhear. "I'm at my brother's wedding and it's been complicated." "I know the timing is terrible," he said, and I could hear car doors slamming in the background. "But I've been feeling awful about this situation for months. We need to handle this properly. And since I'm already in town for business, I thought we could meet and figure out the paperwork together. Just tell me where you are. Maybe it was the emotional exhaustion, maybe it was the wine, or maybe I was just so desperate for any kind of human connection that didn't involve being judged and found wanting. Whatever the reason, I found myself giving him the address of the country club. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "And Angela, I'm really sorry about the timing." I hung up and went back inside, trying to act normal while my mind raced. How was I going to explain to my accidental husband that I was at a wedding where the bride had spent the entire day systematically destroying my self-worth? This day couldn't possibly get any more surreal. I tried to blend into the crowd, but everywhere I looked, I saw Christine holding court, probably telling more people about my simple career choices. Jake was nowhere to be seen, probably networking with his new in-laws. I felt invisible and unwanted at my own brother's wedding. About 20 minutes later, I heard a commotion near the entrance. Guests were turning to look toward the front of the reception hall, their conversations shifting to excited whispers. That's when I saw him walking through the doors, and suddenly I understood why everyone was staring. Daniel looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than I make in 6 months, and he carried himself with the kind of confidence that made everyone in the room take notice. Behind him were 2 men in dark suits who were clearly security, and the way people were looking at him suggested he was someone important. But the most shocking thing was the recognition in people's faces. I could hear whispers of, "Is that Daniel Park?" And "Oh my God, that's the Connect World guy." I had no idea what Connect World was, but from the way people were reacting, it was obviously something significant. Daniel's eyes scanned the room until they found me, and then he walked straight over like there weren't 200 other people watching his every move. When he reached me, he did something that made my brain completely short-circuit. He pulled me into his arms and kissed me like we were deeply in love. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "The flight was delayed, but I wouldn't miss your brother's wedding for anything in the world." I stood there in complete shock, trying to process what was happening. This man I barely remembered was playing the role of devoted husband, and everyone around us was absolutely mesmerized. Across the room, I could see Christine's mouth hanging open in disbelief. "Daniel," I whispered urgently, "what are you doing?" "Trust me," he whispered back with a reassuring smile. "Just go with it now." "Which one is your brother?" Before I could answer, Jake appeared at my side, looking confused and more than a little concerned about the obvious VIP who had just claimed to be married to his sister. "Angela, who is this?" Jake asked, his business instincts clearly trying to assess the situation. Daniel extended his hand with a warm, confident smile. "You must be Jake. I'm Daniel Park, Angela's husband. Congratulations on your wedding. Everything looks absolutely beautiful." I watched my brother's face cycle through confusion, shock, disbelief, and then something that looked like panic. "Husband Angela, what is he talking about?" "It's complicated," I managed to say, still trying to wrap my head around what was happening. 6 months too complicated," Daniel said smoothly. "I've been traveling extensively for business, but I couldn't miss the chance to finally meet my new brother-in-law. Angela has told me so much about you." That's when Christine materialized beside us, like a shark smelling blood in the water. I could see her trying to figure out who Daniel was and why guests kept staring at him with star-struck expressions. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said, extending her hand with that practiced fake smile. "I'm Ein, Jake's wife." "Daniel Park," he replied, taking her hand. "Angela's husband. You have an absolutely stunning wedding, Angela's been so excited to celebrate with you. Christine's smile wavered as her mind clearly raced to process this information. Angela never mentioned being married. We prefer to keep our private life private, Daniel said with easy charm. Angela is wonderfully modest about our relationship. I could see Christine's confusion deepening, trying to figure out who this obviously wealthy and important man was. That's when one of her father's business associates approached our group, looking genuinely starstruck. "Excuse me," the man said, "but are you Daniel Park, the founder of Connect World?" "I am," Daniel replied modestly. "This is incredible," the man continued enthusiastically. "Your platform completely revolutionized how businesses approach social media marketing. My company has tripled its revenue since we started implementing your algorithms. You're absolutely brilliant." I watched Christine's face transform as the implications hit her like a freight train. Daniel wasn't just wealthy, he was famous wealthy, billionaire wealthy, tech mogul wealthy, and he was claiming to be married to me, the charity case she'd been humiliating all evening. "Mr. Park," she said, her voice suddenly honey-sweet, "I had no idea Angela was married to someone so accomplished. She's been incredibly secretive about her personal life." "That's my Angela," Daniel said, putting his arm around my waist in a gesture so natural it almost felt real. "She never brags about anything, especially not her incredible work as a social worker. Did you know she's personally helped over 300 families find stable housing in just the past 2 years? She's absolutely extraordinary." The way he said it with such genuine admiration and pride made my heart skip several beats. Here was a complete stranger defending my career more passionately than my own family ever had. Christine's smile was becoming increasingly strained. "Of course, social work is very noble. It's the most important work there is," Daniel continued without missing a beat. "Angela tells me you come from a pharmaceutical background. Christine, you must understand better than most how crucial social workers are in addressing mental health crises and substance abuse issues in our communities." I watched Christine scramble to agree, nodding enthusiastically while clearly having no idea what she should say. The same woman who had been mocking my career choice just an hour earlier was now pretending to respect it because she thought it might help her network with a billionaire. "Actually," Daniel continued, "I've been looking for opportunities to expand my foundation's work in social services. Angela has been invaluable in advising me on the most effective programs to support. Her expertise in the field is absolutely unmatched." Now I was genuinely confused. Daniel was talking like we'd been having in-depth conversations about his charitable work, when in reality we'd spent one drunken evening together 6 months ago, talking about how lost we both felt. But everyone around us was hanging on his every word, including several of Christine's family members who had suddenly appeared nearby. "You run a foundation?" Christine's father asked, inserting himself into the conversation. "Several, actually," Daniel replied casually. "But I'm most passionate about our work addressing homelessness and supporting at-risk youth. Angela's insights have been absolutely instrumental in shaping our entire approach. It was like watching a master class in social engineering. With just a few carefully chosen sentences, Daniel had completely transformed how everyone saw me. I went from being the embarrassing charity worker to being an expert consultant for a billionaire's foundation. The same people who had been looking at me with pity or disdain were now viewing me with genuine respect and interest. "I'd love to discuss potential partnerships," Christine's father said eagerly. "Our pharmaceutical division has been researching mental health applications." "I'd be very interested in that conversation," Daniel replied diplomatically. Though, of course, any partnerships would need Angela's full approval. She's extremely particular about maintaining the integrity of the program she works with. It was surreal. Suddenly, I wasn't just the sister they had to tolerate. I was someone whose opinion mattered, whose work had real value, whose expertise was actively sought after. And all because a man I barely knew was treating me with the basic respect I deserved. As the evening progressed, Daniel never left my side. He introduced himself to everyone as my devoted husband, speaking about my work with genuine knowledge and passion that surprised me. He discussed social justice issues with an intelligence that was clearly impressing everyone. And he made absolutely sure that every person in that room understood that he considered my career not just respectable, but admirable. I watched Christine's behavior change completely throughout the night. The woman who had spent months subtly and not so subtly insulting me was suddenly my best friend, asking detailed questions about my work and hanging on my every word. It was pathetic and infuriating, but I had to admit it was also deeply satisfying. But the most surprising moment came when Daniel asked if he could address the assembled guests. Jake looked nervous but couldn't exactly refuse. So Daniel stood up with that natural confidence and commanded the attention of the entire room. "I want to thank Jake and Christine for welcoming me to this beautiful celebration," he began, his voice carrying easily across the reception hall. "I know my arrival was unexpected, but I couldn't miss the opportunity to celebrate love and family. I also want to take this moment to talk about someone extraordinarily special to me. My wife, Angela." The room fell completely silent, every eye focused on him. I felt my cheeks burning, having no idea what he was about to say, but knowing it would change everything. "Most of you know me as a businessman," Daniel continued. "But what you might not realize is that everything I've achieved has been inspired by people like Angela, who dedicate their lives to actually making the world better. While I was building companies and accumulating wealth, Angela was building communities and saving lives." He turned to look directly at me, and for a moment I completely forgot we were strangers pretending to be married. The sincerity in his eyes was absolutely unmistakable. "Social workers like Angela are the true backbone of our society," he went on, his voice filled with conviction. "They're the ones who catch children before they fall through the cracks, who help families stay together during their darkest moments, who provide hope when everything seems hopeless. What Angela does isn't just a job, it's a calling. And anyone who doesn't recognize the immense value in that calling simply doesn't understand what real success actually looks like." The room erupted in thunderous applause, and I felt tears streaming down my face. But these weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of finally being seen and valued for who I truly was. As the reception wound down and guests began to leave, I finally got a chance to talk to Daniel privately. We stepped out onto the same patio where I'd answered his life-changing phone call just hours earlier. "Why did you do all that?" I asked, still trying to process everything that had happened. "You don't even really know me." He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky. "6 months ago, you were the first person I'd met in years who cared more about helping others than helping yourself. You talked about your work with such genuine passion, such love for the people you serve. It made an impression on me that I've never forgotten. But the foundation work, the charitable programs, you talked like we'd been collaborating for months." He smiled, and I saw something vulnerable in his expression. "I wasn't lying about having foundations, Angela, and I wasn't lying about being passionate about social justice. What I witnessed tonight was a room full of people disrespecting someone who deserves nothing but admiration. I couldn't stand by and watch that happen to you. So you decided to play my billionaire husband to teach them a lesson. I decided to show them what you're really worth," he said simply. "And Angela, you're worth so much more than they were giving you credit for." We talked for another hour under those stars, and I learned that Daniel wasn't just wealthy. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and genuinely committed to using his resources to help others. His success hadn't made him cynical. It had made him more aware of his responsibility to give back. More importantly, I discovered that our drunken Vegas wedding hadn't been completely random. We'd connected that night because we were both people who felt isolated by our choices. Me for choosing purpose over profit, him for choosing innovation over expectation. "So, what happens now?" I asked as the evening drew to a close. "That's entirely up to you," Daniel replied. "Honestly, I came here tonight planning to discuss annulment paperwork, but I have to admit I'm having second thoughts about everything. About the annulment? About all of it?" He said, "Angela, I know we barely know each other, and I know this whole situation is completely insane. But what if it's not insane? What if it's exactly what we both needed to find?" I looked at this man who had appeared out of nowhere and completely transformed my life in the span of just a few hours. He'd given me back my dignity, shown my family what I was truly worth, and made me feel valued for the first time in longer than I could remember. "Are you actually suggesting we stay married?" I asked, hardly believing I was having this conversation. "I'm suggesting we take the time to get to know each other properly," he said. "No pressure, no expectations, no pretending. Just two people who accidentally found each other, figuring out whether maybe it wasn't such an accident after all. Standing there on that patio, thinking about everything that had happened, I realized something profound. For the first time in my adult life, someone had seen my worth without me having to prove it first. Daniel had looked at my career, my choices, my entire life, and instead of finding them lacking, he'd found them inspiring. Whether or not our accidental marriage turned into something real, he'd already given me something invaluable. The reminder that I didn't need anyone else's approval to know my own worth. My work mattered, my choices were valid, and anyone who couldn't see that wasn't worthy of being part of my life. I looked back through the windows at the reception where Christine was still playing her part as the supportive sister-in-law, while Jake watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. They'd shown me exactly who they really were tonight, and I would never forget it. But I'd also learned something else. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters can change everything. 6 months ago, I drunkenly married a stranger in Vegas, thinking it was the biggest mistake of my life. Tonight, that same stranger had reminded me exactly who I was and what I was worth. Okay, I said to Daniel, surprising myself with how certain I felt. Let's see where this incredible journey takes us. He smiled, and for the first time all day, I felt like everything in my world was exactly as it should be. If this story resonates with you, remember that meaningful work is never something to be ashamed of. Whether you're a teacher, social worker, nurse, or anyone helping others, your work matters more than you know. What did you think of Daniel's perfect timing? Should Angela give him a real chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories that prove sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. Until next time.